Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm Rachel Patton, Executive Director of Preserve Arkansas. Preserve Arkansas is the statewide nonprofit advocate for historic preservation. Welcome to our Women in Preservation program. This program features women who are working to save the state's historic places. Many thanks to our series sponsor, DMX Architecture in Fayetteville. Many of you are already members of Preserve Arkansas, and we thank you for your generous support. If you are not already a member, I'd like to invite you to formally join us for as little as $50 a year. Your memberships are vitally important to our organization and allow us to achieve our mission of saving Arkansas's historic places. I have a couple of announcements before I introduce today's speaker. First, you are invited to join us for Behind the Big House. This program will take place on a Friday, Saturday, December 2nd and 3rd in Drew County, Arkansas. Behind the Big House moves beyond big houses or stately historic homes to explore Arkansas's extant slave dwellings and remember the enslaved people who inhabited them. The workshop, which has been held at various locations around Arkansas, focuses on foodways, researching the lives of enslaved Arkansans, and best practices for interpreting slavery at historic sites and museums. This program is free and open to the public, and it's supported in part by a grant from the Arkansas Humanities Council and the National Endowment for the Humanities. There's more information in the full program available on our website at preservearkansas.org. You are also invited to join us on our holiday ramble on Saturday, December the 10th. Board a charter bus in downtown North Little Rock and enjoy snacks and libations during a ride down to historic Washington State Park. Learn about Washington's history and tour several of the park's historic buildings during their Christmas and candlelight celebration. Then sit down for a country supper at the Brunson House before just doing a relaxing, quiet ride back to Central Arkansas. More information and tickets are available at preservearkansas.org. And now it's my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Pam Beasley. A native Mississippian, Pam Beasley is the superintendent of Historic Washington State Park. She holds an MA in Museum Studies and Anthropology from the University of Arkansas and a BA in History and Anthropology from Mississippi State University. Before becoming superintendent of Historic Washington, she worked for 30 years at the Arkansas Museum of Natural Resources in Smackover. She is the co-editor of The Forgotten Expedition, 1804 to 1805, the Louisiana Purchase Journals of Dunbar and Hunter. Welcome, Pam.
Hello, everybody.
You look good, Pam. I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks. First, I want to say thank you so much for allowing me to spend a little bit of time with you all this afternoon and tell you a little bit about what's happening and what has happened through the years. Well, heck, I guess all the way back to in the beginning of Pam. But before I get started, I wanted to bring up the ramble that's coming up the 9th and 10th, Christmas and Candlelight. That if you get to come to Historic Washington, you can see the collaboration that takes part with 3 different entities: the state park itself, Historic Washington State Park, Pioneer Washington Foundation, and the City of Washington. And all 3 work together and have to work together in order to save this important part of Arkansas's history. So I just kind of wanted to throw a plug in for the ramble. But before we get started on that, or before you start calling and making your reservations for that with Rachel, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about what's your superpower. And earlier, Rachel and I were talking, and I said technology is not my superpower. So if something goes amok, I will certainly try to get it figured out, or Rachel will, and then we can go on with this program. So what is your superpower? How did we get from here to here? And that's a pretty tough question for some, because there was a lot of money spent on college. So I continued, for a long time, continued to live in education debt. But I also learned a lot of things. Some of them were heartbreaking. Some of them were joy beyond joy. So we're going to walk through from this little girl to this woman who's hugging a deer. So let's see what we've got. Is it time traveling that took me through all this? I don't know. Because when I was not much older than that 4-year-old there in that first picture, I always played 2 things. One was war. I think I just like to beat people up. And the other one was cowboys and Indians. I was never the cowboy, ever. So those kind of things were always fun for me. I had an interest in history even before I started school. And speaking of school, I was a horrible student, horrible. But the only subject that I could excel at, basically, was history. So, am I a time traveler? Have I been in the past? Have I been a Revolutionary War soldier? I don't know. We'll have to see. I kind of go back to this. This is where I'm from. This is Snowden House. Okay, so it's not really where I grew up. I grew up in a 3-bedroom ranch outside of town, outside of this town, Columbus, Mississippi. And if you've ever been there and you look at some of these pictures that here on the screen, it's a gorgeous, gorgeous town. And as a child, I played in this cemetery with the weeping angel. Whenever we would go to my grandmother's, I would see this Italianate house that's just above her. When I would go with my parents or with my mother, usually, to pay the cable bill, it was over in front of that church. When we went to the library, this dog down here on the bottom of this picture intrigued me, because my grandfather always told me that used to be a high school. The building right next to it was. And he said every time that dog, and there was a deer on the other side, heard the school bell ring, they ran around the school building. And I was way too old before I realized that he was pulling my leg. But so this is what I saw every day. When I was about 11, my dad, over just dinner conversation one night, mentioned that this fellow here, Governor James Whitfield, was his great-great-grandfather. And I had never heard that before. And Mother and I started talking with Dad, and he really didn't know much about him. He only knew that my grandmother's father had died when she was 5 years old. She really never spent much time with the Whitfield family. And he said, and there's even one of those houses that the governor built. So that intrigued my mother and I, and we started doing research on the genealogy of the Whitfield family. And that really taught me at a pretty early age how to do historic research. So, what's your superpower? I asked you that a while ago. So the path that I took is what made my superpowers. Not just what I was interested in, but the path that I took. Because when I apologize, that's some medical equipment going off. When I was a junior in college, my sponsor was asking me, she said, Pam, what are you going to do with your degree? And I told her with my full intent, I was going to be a forensic anthropologist. And she looked at me kind of like I had a horn growing out of my head and said, but you have a degree in history. You're not going to use that? I said, well, I'm not going to teach school. And she said, well, have you ever thought about museum work? And I never, ever thought that there was a career in that. I guess I thought that there were little elves that ran around museums and put up exhibits and did research. I've been going to exhibits and museums and historic sites my entire life, but I didn't understand or think of it as a profession. Like Rachel has said earlier, I have spent a good bit of time in Arkansas State Parks. I'm currently here at Historic Washington after spending a good deal of time in Smackover. So today, I want to show you what Historic Washington is all about. And like I said earlier, that includes working with the Pioneer Washington Foundation in the city of Washington in order to bring together two visitors and to preserve the history of Arkansas for everybody. So we're going to kind of take a stroll through town. The first thing that we're going to take a look at is the courthouses. Well, first, let's back up a little bit. Let's talk about the town itself. Washington, Arkansas is on the Southwest Trail, which stretched from St. Louis to Mexico. Now, Mexico was only about 12 miles from Washington in the 1820s. And as more and more settlers started coming through, Washington was a jumping off spot. It had always been a place where people could meet. As a matter of fact, the indigenous people had called it the Hill of Five Trails, of the area where five trails came together. The town was laid out in 1826, and in 1830 it was incorporated. Where this 1836 courthouse stands overlooks the Southwest Trail. That courthouse served as the Confederate capital after the capture of Little Rock. But really the most important thing, in my opinion, and to many of you, will be that this building, the building of the 1836 Hempstead County Courthouse was the first building that received public funds for restoration. They were awarded $5,000 to preserve that building in 1930s. The other building that you see here is the 1874 courthouse. And this building serves as the park's visitor center and is really in the center of town now, as the town began to spread from where the 1836 courthouse was or is, and it began to spread out more. This is now really what is in the center of town. But there are other houses and buildings throughout. What I have here in front of you is the Royston Townhouse here on the left and the Royston Log House on the right. The townhouse is a Greek revival built for Grandison D. Royston in 1845. Grandison was a lawyer, and he served in both the 1836 and the 1874 Arkansas Constitutional Conventions. The building on the right, the log cabin, was moved into town from Royston's plantation, which is just out of town, northeast of town. But it sits on a location that was Royston's, where Royston had his original law office. And what you don't see is off to the side of that log cabin is a giant magnolia tree. And we'll talk about that a bit more in a bit. The Block Katz house and the Sanders house sit on the actual locations where they were constructed. The Block house is a Greek revival. Is a federal style. It was owned and built by a man by the name of Abraham Block. And Mr. Block was an immigrant to this country from Bohemia. He made his wealth through mercantile stores. So this house, where this house sits, is across the street, basically, from, or across a block from that 1836 courthouse. So this house has seen a lot of history through its time. The Sanders Farmstead House, which is here on the right, it's a Greek revival. It was built in 1845 by Simon T. Sanders. And he was the Hempstead County clerk from 1839 until 1869. This house is an urban farmstead. And if you could see behind it, you would see gardens, you would see outbuildings, and a barn that was prominent on that entire city block. A lot of the places, a lot of the buildings and homes in Washington have been relocated to the area. For example, the Brunson House, which is where I'm talking to you out of today, is a home built for Dr. Robert Brunson, and he was from Columbus, Arkansas, and it was built around 1860. It was relocated to Washington from about 8 miles out of town. This is one of those buildings that the Pioneer Washington Foundation moved into town, and the park acquired it and has restored it. It now serves as a rental facility for the park. So what we end up having here are weddings, business meetings, smaller parties. The Crouch House is an interesting story. It was built about 1857, and it was outside of town, but it was moved into town to represent a home that had the same floor plan of the original home that sat there. So it represents that, that architecture from Washington. So a lot of people will say, good grief, that's a lot of houses. And we do have a lot of houses, but that's not all we are in Washington. We're not just a bunch of buildings. We have also have some replica buildings. This Morrison Tavern is on the location and is built in the style of a tavern that was there in that location. It too was built in the 60s, and now serves as a location where we do educational programming out of. You can learn to weave back here in this back portion of that home, of that building. Then you have the Sanders Barn. As I said before, it was an urban farmstead, and so they had the barn, the outhouses, the such. But we also have museums. And the B.W. Edwards Museum is a weapons museum that has a variety of guns and other weapons that would be anything from matchlocks to repeating rifles to Bowie knives. The print shop is a museum as well. You can take a step in there, take a look at how printing was done in the 19th and early 20th centuries. And we still use this print shop. We print a number of things out of that shop regularly. But we are also preserving animals, heritage animals, such as these cochin chickens and the Belgian draft horses. Those boys, that's Jim and Coley there, they pull our Surrey that you can take a ride on in Washington, take a look at Washington in a more relaxed atmosphere, sitting, enjoying the work of Jim and Coley. Hopefully in the not too distant future, we will be able to bring in some other heritage animals, but we shall have to wait and for the right time and the right location to bring those in. Washington State Park also preserves the Pioneer Cemetery. And it was established in about 1824, and the last burial in the cemetery was in 1921. It's maintained but inactive. There are Revolutionary War soldiers buried there, and it's quite large. When one goes to the cemetery, you look out and you see a sprinkling of monuments, of tombstones, but so many have been broken or disintegrated. been removed, what have you. So it's quite large and could be in excess of over 200 burials in that cemetery. So we've got museums, we've got buildings, we've got a cemetery, we have historic trees. And all of these are things that we are charged with preserving for the future. The former grand champion Magnolia was not built. It was planted in 1839 by Grandison Royston, the fellow that we spoke about earlier. Grandison also planted one at his home, which we saw a photo of earlier. The other is the pecan, Abraham Block pecan, that's about 1830, maybe a little earlier. And it has been growing there on the block lot for quite some time. The park has a number of champion trees in its care, or historic trees in its care. We also have the Williams Tavern Restaurant and the Jail B&B. Both of these buildings are historic buildings. The Williams Tavern Restaurant was, parts of it date back to about 1832. It was owned by John Williams, and then it was moved into town and now serves lunch daily. The Jail B&B has 8 rooms and was built about 1873. It's been converted to a B&B before the state park acquired it. And we have 8 rooms, and some even say that some of those rooms might be haunted. One would have to experience that for themselves. We also have a blacksmith shop. This is an area that we present to the public. So we talk about the blacksmith, the importance of the blacksmith in a town like Washington. And of course, we also bring up a fellow by the name of James Black, who is probably our Washington's most famous blacksmith. He is credited with constructing and making the Bowie knife for Jim Bowie before he headed across into Mexico to fight for Texas independence. Something else that we do, and I think is very important that we do, is living history. And if you have ever attended a program where living history is taking place, you become immersed in it, and you enjoy it enough that you can see in it the good, the bad. And that's what a good living history program does. It shows you the good, it shows you the bad, and then it is left for you to interpret how it should be viewed. As I look across this page here, I see, involvement in weaving in the print shop. One of our newest programs down here on the bottom is saying goodbye to Jenny. It was a wake that we had for a young woman. So those are that's one of the ways that we tell the story of Washington and of the 19th century. We offer a variety of workshops and programs, and this is just a handful. From the Red River Symposium, which is offered in July each year, to something that we will have in the next coming weeks, Sweets and Treats, Saying Goodbye to Jenny, there you see, Trial by Jury, which gives people an opportunity to listen to arguments of a fellow who is being charged with murder. And the audience decides, due to the two living history interpreters who are portraying the lawyers, does this person, what is their fate? There's another trial by jury that we do. This one that you see down here is in the 1836 courthouse. We also have one that is not presented as often in the 1874. One of the things that we also have a lot of interest in is Washington After Dark. And that's some of the unusual stories that you hear from Washington that can't necessarily be explained. We also hold festivals. As we spoke earlier, Christmas and Candlelight is coming up the 9th and 10th. This is last year's poster. And this is really when I think Washington is at its most beautiful. When you walk the town at night and you see the luminaries all through town, and you see the houses and you see the costumed people walking around, you feel like you have stepped back in time. Another event that has been going on for this past year was the 54th. We have the 55th coming up, and that's the Jonquil Festival, which is an arts and crafts, music, tours of the town in the springtime. And this is a great time to come out and see the flowers, but you better get here early because they soon get trampled. That is a beautiful sight to see in the early spring. So that's one of those things that we invite you to come out and experience as well. Our newest festival that we have partnered with the University of Arkansas, Hope, Texarkana, and the City of Washington is the James Black Bowie Heritage Festival, which is held in April. We had the initial program this year, and it came off to great success. So I ask you, what is your superpower? I say that mine is saving history, and I do the best I can at that superpower. It's a struggle, and it's probably more of a struggle now than it has ever been, simply because we are in an environment where some do not believe that certain aspects should be told. We are in a time when money has become a major factor. I guess money has always been a factor and always will be as long as we're around, but it seems that certain monies are pulled in a variety of locations. And historic sites and museums struggle for their place at the table to receive those funds. So every superhero has an alter ego, and this is mine. My alter ego lives at home with this big fuzzy sheepdog who is a spoiled rotten brat. So again, I ask you, are you a historic preservation superhero? Or what is your superhero power? I'd love to take questions if you have any. Or, I think Rachel will take some that have been typed in. So I'll be happy to take those.
Thank you, Pam. Let's see if we got some questions coming in. I love the photo of you and your dog.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Okay.
That's at that magnolia tree. You can see behind me that tree.
Are you at the Champion one or the one at the Royston house?
This is the former Champion. This is the one by the log cabin.
Okay. Okay, that's a great photo. Okay, let's see. From Mary Jane Silva, and I'll invite people to continue adding comments and questions as I go through these. Mary Jane Silva, I love how you have so many things to do and see. What a great trip this will be for the Ramble. I agree. Patricia Blick, thank you for sharing, Pam. Do you get to reinvest the money you generate at the rental venue and at the B&B? Does that stay at the park?
The way that Arkansas State Parks, some of it does, yes. Some of it goes into the general budget of what we have for the park, and any revenues. It doesn't matter if you're at Historic Washington or if you are at DeGray. We generate the funds and it goes back into the pot. So yes, the answer to that is yes, in a roundabout way.
Okay, thank you. But you've got to share it with everybody out of the pot, right?
Correct.
Okay. From Mary McGee, there was once a Black History Museum there. Is it still open?
It is not open. The lady who had that has passed away. However, her daughter has started investing back into the stabilization of that building, and with the hopes that she will be able to follow her mother and open or reopen the Black History Museum.
Thank you. So is that building owned by the state park, or is it owned by the museum?
It is not owned by the park. It is privately held.
Okay. Okay, some comments. Love the dogs. What is your favorite part or place of Washington?
I think my favorite building is the Royston Townhouse. It has beautiful stained glass in it at both doors, the entry, the front and the back door. And to me, that sets that house off. There's a lot of Greek revival in this town, or at least that's what has survived. But that house in particular has an interesting spot for me. It's the one that I think is the most gorgeous.
Okay, Malin Rice. What a great challenge to us all. What is our superpower? I'm so glad I clicked on this program. Great program for us, Pam.
Oh, you're welcome.
And let's see, we've got some more in the Q&A. Okay, from Marcia Daniels. Is the former Champion Magnolia still alive?
Oh yes, that's it right there behind me. It is still alive and well, because I was told when I interviewed for this job that I better not let this tree die on my watch. So it's extremely important to us to preserve both of those two magnolias, as well as all 7 of our heritage trees or special trees. We have a tree that had gone to the moon. So it's a pine tree. So that's just those 2 that I showed you, the pecan and the that particular magnolia, are just 2 of 5. Some interesting stories go with the trees as well as with the houses.
Thank you. Okay, from Missy McSwain, thank you, Pam, your friends at Pioneer Washington Restoration appreciate you. And let's see if there's any more in the chat. Okay. And I had a couple as well. So y'all still have time if anybody else has a question. You've already been asked about your favorite spot. Oh, if money was not an issue, money and time, if you had all the time in the world, are there some wish list programs or projects that you would institute at the state park? Or are there any buildings that need work, or what would kind of be on your wish list of things to do if you had all the time and money?
That's kind of a difficult question, because it's kind of like picking your favorite kid. Which it's which kid are you with right now that needs the most attention? But if money and time were no issues, I think that that more staffing would be great. That way we could present more programs. Of course, there are some buildings, not necessarily the buildings themselves, although that is a constant, an almost daily activity is building maintenance. But to invest in programming so that more people can enjoy and get a better understanding of the importance of Washington, not only to Southwest Arkansas, not just to the state of Arkansas, but to the nation, because it has played through some of the people who have inhabited Washington, some of the folks who have come through Washington. It is important on a national scale, not just a local and state venue, but nationally.
Okay, and is there an opportunity for people to volunteer at the park?
There certainly is. I mean, we always are needing something from seamstress, someone who can do sewing for us, or gardening work. And we have set up, or in the process of setting up, a way that people can apply to be volunteers, and so that we can put people into the skill sets that best suits them and that benefits both them and the park. So yes, there's always something. You can reach out to us about volunteering and fill out those applications, and we can move forward from there.
Thank you, Pam. I don't see any other questions or comments. Okay, so I'll say thank you again for such a wonderful program, and we look forward to seeing you in a couple weeks at Christmas and Candlelight for the ramble, for the holiday ramble. So if y'all are interested in a prime time opportunity to see historic Washington, as Pam said, at its most beautiful, then please check out our website and look at the tickets and information for the holiday ramble. Those are available. You can either ride the bus from North Little Rock and the bus will take you there and back, or if you don't want to ride the bus, there's a lower price ticket that you can buy and provide your own transportation and just meet us at Historic Washington. And we will have our full list of the 2023 Women in Preservation programs announced very soon. We have the whole lineup set for next year. We have some great speakers in store for you, so stay tuned for that, and thank you all for watching.
Thanks.
Bye, Pam. Thank you.
Bye.